This is the second episode in a two-part series, and the second series in our latest season covering cold cases across the United States. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are solely the interviewee's own. If you're in need of mental health support, you can reach out to NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, by calling their helpline at 800-950-6264, texting NAMI to 62640, or emailing helpline@nami.org. In a crisis, call or text 988. This is The Fall Line. Last time, we began our coverage of Bryan Vladek Hasel, a 22-year-old who was adopted from Russia at age 5, along with his biological sister Irina. The siblings grew up in Central Florida with their large, blended family. Vladek had always dreamed of becoming a Marine, but separated from the military in 2019 under an honorable discharge for failure to adapt. His family told us that military life brought up difficult memories from his early childhood in a Russian orphanage. In 2021, the Hasels noticed troubling changes in Vladek's behavior. He'd begun giving away his possessions and became intensely focused on religious content about heaven and the afterlife, including videos focused on angels and demons. He had always been generous, but his focus on helping others intensified during this period. He was sometimes giving away money that he simply didn't have to spare. That fall, the family was planning a trip to Tennessee to celebrate Vladek's sister Bethany's birthday. Several of his siblings would be going, along with his father Steve and his mother Cheryl. Though Steve and Cheryl had divorced years earlier, they were making this trip together. Everyone wanted Vladek to come too, but at the last minute, he decided to stay behind. He was living with his father in an apartment near the University of Central Florida campus, and their shared car had broken down and was in the shop, which meant that Vladek would be walking anywhere that he wanted to go. Steve made sure the refrigerator was stocked and left Vladek with enough money and a credit card to cover any expenses. Because the family was headed to the mountains, they worried a little about being able to reach him. Cell phone signals might be spotty, and Vladek only had a basic flip phone. He'd broken his nicer, more modern phone earlier in the year, and he only bothered to carry the simpler model at his family's insistence. On November 4th, 2021, one day before the family left for their trip, there was an incident involving Vladek at the Foxtail coffee shop, one that he himself was not aware of. There are a few things that we have to remind you of. First, Vladek had begun carrying a pocket knife. Since he walked everywhere, he told his father Steve it was for protection. Second, on November 4th, a customer had apparently complained to staff about Vladek making him uncomfortable. That was something the staff had heard about before, and normally they'd speak to him about pacing or loud music, and the issues would be settled. On this day, though, the customer that complained promptly left. Soon after, so did Vladek. But later, that same customer returned and informed staff that Vladek had a pocket knife. More specifically, the customer said that Vladek had placed his knife on the table where he, Vladek, had been sitting. The customer felt that the staff should know, but didn't suggest that there had been any kind of threat. At that point, the staff decided that the next time Vladek came to Foxtail, he'd be permanently trespassed from the premises. He didn't know this, of course, because he had not been made aware of the initial complaint, and he didn't return to the shop for 2 days. On November 6, 2021, while his family was traveling out of state, Vladek stopped by Foxtail Coffee. When he arrived that morning, police were called to issue the official trespass warning. Body cam footage captured him complying with the officer's directions and calmly walking away from the coffee shop. According to the family's accounts, Vladek's last known communication with anyone was a phone call he made to his sister Irina at 1:59 a.m. on November 6. The conversation lasted approximately 4 minutes and was reportedly uneventful. Later that morning came the trespass warning at Foxtail Coffee, and after that, all communication ended. Over the next several days, the family tried to reach Vladek by phone, but none of their calls were returned. They weren't sure if they were having issues because of their remote location in the Tennessee mountains or if Vladek simply wasn't picking up. On November 15, 2021, Steve Hasel returned to Orlando, expecting to find his son Vladek waiting for him at their shared apartment at the place at Alafaya. Instead, he found their home exactly as he'd left it 10 days earlier. A package that had arrived on November 8th was still sitting outside their door. When Steve checked the apartment, he found Vladek's phone in his room, and there were no signs that anyone had been in the apartment since Steve's departure. Food in the fridge was untouched. Their shared car was still waiting to be picked up at the auto shop. That realization marked the beginning of a search that continues more than 4 years later, one that highlights the unique challenges families face when an adult goes missing, and the systemic barriers that can leave loved ones without resources or support. But to understand the links Vladek's family has gone to find him, to seek out any information regarding what might have happened between November 5th and November 15th, and in all the years since, we need to start with a search that began. Based on what Bethany told us, Steve had originally expected to return on November 16th, not the evening of the 15th. The apartment was empty, and it seemed like no one had been inside recently. So, although he found this odd, especially the package on the porch, since Vladek generally did what he said he was going to do, Steve decided to wait and see if his son arrived home. After all, Vlad did spend a lot of time out in the community, and he could have planned to see an acquaintance. But he didn't arrive on November 16th either, and that's when Steve alerted the rest of the family, and they began to search the immediate area for Vlad. When they went through his flip phone, they discovered the text messages were all unread from November 6th on. So, the family did several things. According to what they told Advocate Haley Gray, on November 17th, Bethany filed a missing persons report with the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Then the next day, she requested surveillance footage from the apartment complex, but only recordings from the past 7 days were available. On November 19th, sheriff's deputies searched the woods around the complex with helicopters, drones, and a canine unit. And during that search, they found a red slide shoe. It looked similar to one that Vlad owned. The following day, a friend reported having seen Vladek at 3 a.m. on November 15th, the same day that Steve had returned from Tennessee. The family can't concretely place that on their timeline, but the friend said that they'd spoken for a few minutes, and then Vladek left. There's no ring or other surveillance footage that can verify that specific date. In December, Bethany and her sister Jody created a Facebook group to help bring awareness to Vladek's disappearance. They also filled the area with missing persons flyers, which brought information about a possible sighting, but not necessarily any further clarity. It also made them wonder about the arrival of Steve's package and how that played into the timeline.
When my dad got back from the trip, the package was still outside the door, which was really odd because even there was a potential sighting the week that we were gone from a maintenance worker, and he called and left a voicemail on Dad's phone and said, "Hey, saw your son last Friday. We spoke at the basketball court." And he had said, my dad is hard of hearing, so he thought he said, I saw him go into the woods after we spoke, but what he really said was, you should check the woods behind the basketball court, because Vladek would hang out there. So at the time, we assumed, when he crossed paths with Vladek, would have been Friday the 12th, which was the calendar last Friday, right? But to me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if it was the 12th, the package would have been at the door of the apartment, and you have to walk by their front door to get to the basketball court. It's only 60 feet away. So I feel like Vladek would have brought that inside if he was at the apartment complex. And when someone says last Friday, that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. Last Friday to me could have been a week and a half ago, or it could be a few days ago. So the way everything's described, it really seems like that happened the night Dad left town. It was when the maintenance guy had that interaction, because everything really stopped after Foxtail. The last charge on the credit card was for that cup of coffee that morning. He tells the officer that he doesn't have his phone on him. It's back at the apartment, which it was when Dad got home. He doesn't have the pocket knife on him. It was still at the apartment complex when Dad got home. And all the calls and text messages on Vladek's phone were missed or unread text messages from that morning on after Foxtail. So my family goes off of November 6th, 2021, being the last verifiable sighting of Vladek because you can see him on the body cam footage and everything stops after then.
The family knew Vlad had gotten coffee based on that credit card charge, but they wouldn't know about the events that had actually occurred at the establishment for months, and that information might be vital in understanding why he disappeared. The family told us they didn't discover the trespass warning until February 24th, 2022, more than 3 months later. That's when a detective mentioned it during a meeting about a potential sighting by the friend that we discussed before the break. By then, Night Owl Reconnaissance reports that surveillance footage from businesses near Foxtail had been lost or was no longer preserved.
We found out about the trespass warning in February of 2022. So a few months after he went missing, we were meeting with the detective and they had said that there was another potential sighting at the apartment complex. A friend of Vladek said that Vladek came to their door asking to stay there. And they said it was on the 15th. After being able to talk with that person in more detail, the way they describe what Vladek is wearing and all that, it seems more plausible that it happened around the weekend of the trespass warning because he was wearing very similar clothing during the trespass. So I asked the detective, I was like, okay, they say they saw him on the 15th. Is there any way that we can verify that to make it a verified sighting? And she said, no, he didn't take out his phone and take a picture of your brother that day. And she said, but I can tell you that my department spoke with him on November 6th during a trespass warning. And I was really caught off guard by that because that was the first time we've ever heard about it. I'm like, what do you mean Vladek doesn't get in trouble? Why was there a trespass warning? And it was at Foxtail Coffee Shop, a place that he would go to 3 or 4 times a week, spending hours there. So they knew him well. And I was like, what do you mean? Why was there a trespass warning? And she just said, oh, you know, your brother, he was probably just talking too much. So after we left that meeting, we were able to speak with the store manager at Foxtail. Corporate gave him permission to talk with us. And he said that, you know, Vladek, over the months or whatnot, there had been some complaints from patrons about how he would pace drinking coffee. He wouldn't really sit still. He would walk around the coffee shop. Vladek isn't one to sit still. And then other times, you know, he'd be listening to his music with his earbuds and it might be too loud. People would complain. So during those situations, you know, employee would approach Vladek and say, hey, can you sit down? Can you turn down your music? And he would always comply. So the manager said that on November 4th, 2021, a customer made a complaint saying that Vladek was making him feel uncomfortable. And the person didn't say anything more than that. And the person said that he was going to leave. So since that guy left, they didn't say anything to Vladek. And that person came back later on and said, hey, I see him sitting outside, you know, your place of business. I also wanted to let you know that earlier I saw him put a pocket knife on the table. And, you know, since they have a zero weapons policy, that's when they had to go ahead and take some action. They called the sheriff's office to come out and issue a trespass warning at that time. But by the time the sheriff's office was there, Vladek had already left and didn't know anything was wrong, didn't know that he upset anybody. So the following day, he helps dad pack the car for the trip. You know, he calls Irina, his biological sister, late that night, like 1 a.m. And Irina said, like, it was just a normal conversation, just checking in, seeing how each other was doing, lasted about 5 minutes. Nothing seemed array with Vladek. You know, at this time, the car's in the shop. So The next morning, Vladek walks back to Foxtail and they go ahead and issue the trespass warning again. So they have the sheriff's office come out. And at this point, the officer comes out and is talking with Vladek, and, the officer doesn't tell him why he's getting the warning. He just says, oh, it's a private business. They could issue a trespass warning for whatever they want, even the type of shirt that you're wearing. So Vladek, again, is, deflecting, asking the officer how his day's going, trying to start small talk about the weather and like all of this, but and as respectful as possible. But I can see the confusion he's trying to hide. I can see the hurt that he's trying to mask. And like even at one point, he sees the officer's patrol car and asks, "Do you believe in God?" And the officer said, "Oh, we're not allowed to talk about that." And Vlad's like, "Oh man, that's messed up. They have the emblem on your car and God we trust, and you can't even talk about it." Like stuff like that, just trying to make a joke and lighten the mood is how he gets through uncomfortable situations. And the officer, asked him about, what's your phone number? And Vladek said, "Oh, I just got a new number recently. I don't have it memorized." The phone's at the apartment. He empties his pockets to show the officer what's in his pockets. And, everything on his person is still missing. He pulls out like his Bank of America debit card, his ID, the credit card that he used that morning. None of that has been recovered. And Foxtail was able to give us a screenshot of what he was wearing during the trespass warning. And at the beginning stages of the search, the sheriff's office did find a red slide shoe along the wood line of the apartment complex. They asked my dad if he recognized it. And dad told them, well, Vladek wears slides, but he couldn't recall a red pair. And they showed it to me too during the meeting in February, and I said the same thing. And then when we met with the manager at Foxtail and they showed us a screenshot of what he was wearing during the trespass warning, he's wearing black hoodie, khaki pants, and red slide shoes. So, yeah, 4 years later, and we're still no closer. There's been no leads, no sightings, just a lot of unanswered questions.
Cheryl also discussed the body cam footage. When she viewed it, she was worried about Vladek's state of mind.
So I listened to that, and there's one time where he starts walking close to the officer again, who's already told him to move back by the curb. And Vladek wasn't one to stand still. He slowly moved and paced a lot. He just did that, moving, walking. And it wasn't quick. It was slow, kind of like a thoughtful thing that he'd do. And then he'd come back with a question for the officer. And so he asked him a question, and the officer said, "Do you understand? You can't come back here. You can't be here." And I heard him under his breath say, "I can't be here anymore anyway." And I'm like, I was taken aback when I heard that. Like, what did that mean?
The delay in learning about the trespass warning left the family frustrated. From their perspective, they'd been operating without key pieces of information regarding Vladek's disappearance. In April of 2022, the family launched a billboard campaign to keep Vladek's case in the public eye. The billboards featured Vladek's photo and contact information, positioned along busy Orlando area roads where thousands of commuters would see them daily. The family also focused on rallying local news coverage. Over the months that followed, outlets like Wish 2, News 13, Click Orlando, and Fox 35 continued covering their search efforts. News Nation brought national attention to the case, helping expand awareness beyond Central Florida. And that summer, Vladek's family organized a comprehensive search effort. The Hasels told advocate Haley Gray that Q, a nonprofit that we've covered on the show before, conducted an in-depth search with more than 24 dogs. The family hoped that the specialized canine teams might find something that initial searches had missed. But despite the extensive effort, nothing new was uncovered. Then, in September of 2022, Hurricane Ian hit Florida. The timing could not have been worse for search efforts. Per Haley Gray's interviews with the Hasels, Steve was relocating when the storm arrived, and the flooding damaged his residence. The water destroyed most of Vladek's remaining possessions. The family managed to save only a few meaningful items, like his Bible and his passport. It was another heartbreaking setback during an already difficult time. But the Hasels were determined to keep up their search and make sure Vladek stayed in the public consciousness. Maintaining that presence, though, meant dealing with challenges that they couldn't have possibly anticipated. Bethany talked to us about what running a missing persons campaign actually involves.
So, since Vladek went missing on, the day that we reported him missing, we made flyers with my dad's phone number on it. And I will say to anyone that's listening to my voice right now, do not put your personal number on a missing persons flyer. We went through a lot of trial and error as, families that are thrown into this, they have no idea what they're doing. They don't know who to trust. So, that night, yes, we got the call from the maintenance worker, but we also got spam calls and, there was a text message about, I've got your son, he's in my basement, blah, blah, blah. And we were with the sheriff's office at that same time. So, they were able to verify that, no, it's a fake text. And even I have received text messages over the years that are fake. And they're so convincing because, for me, I haven't put my phone number out there, but everything is public knowledge. And, this one text message had said, do you know Bryan Hasel? And it just kind of went from there and into this crazy story of hit by car, blah, blah, blah. This is how you get more information. And it was fake. And it's stuff like that that just turns your stomach upside down, that there's people out there that are just taking advantage of these families that are just trying to find answers. And we're already going through the hardest days of our lives. And just to add to that anxiety and those fears is just unreal. But we made a page for him on all social media platforms to just keep awareness out there. We were able to partner with Lamar Billboards, and they sponsored billboards, several in Orlando and several along I-4 going from Orlando to Tampa, being able to get local news involved and keep his story national news a little bit. Anything that we can do to keep his story out there. It's been an uphill battle because the stigma is really true. It's really hard to get coverage for young men who go missing. It's hard to really get people to care about their stories because, they're an adult. If they want to leave, they can. And, I get that. I understand where you're coming from, but you don't know what's going on in that person's life. You have no facts to base that theory on if they left intentionally, willingly, or not, or if they're in the right mental headspace to understand what's going on around them. And until you have facts to base that on, I'm going to keep fighting for my brother. And I would hope that you would fight with me, because every person that is missing, that justice has not come yet. We need answers. We need resolution. And we can't fight this journey alone. We need a nation to come around us. It's, missing individuals in the United States and beyond is not talked about enough. There's not enough done. And so many people that I cross paths with don't realize how severe of a problem it is. My family is, we've built bonds with so many families navigating this pain that we can rely on one another to get through it, because your friends, your distant loved ones, they do what they can, but they don't understand personally how it affects you. 4 years later, I'm still torn pieces. I am not a whole person because my brother is missing. And it's only those that have navigated this pain. And there's so many families that have gone through this for decades. And my heart is so broken for them. It's not right. There's answers out there. More needs to be done for these stories. More needs to be done for these families. We live in such a technological society that it would be so easy to solve countless cases if more was done. If more platforms would, instead of an ad for a vacation to Bermuda, they showed flyers of missing persons in your area. So you could get involved and you could learn about their cases and see how you can advocate for someone that's missing from your town. And you might be the difference in that family's life just by sharing one flyer, just by one click of a button to your group of 50, 100 friends. A tip might come to a family that hasn't had anything for far too long.
In November 2022, new detectives were assigned to Vladek's case. Around that time, the family also hired a private investigator to pursue additional leads. According to family accounts shared with advocate Haley Gray, they hoped the private investigator might uncover information they felt had been missed, including additional surveillance footage. Though he was able to discover more about Vladek's life prior to his disappearance, they didn't find anything that would help locate him. When Bethany spoke with the news site MEAWW in 2023, she shared her theories about what might have happened. Either Vladek had experienced, quote, some kind of psychotic break, or someone had taken advantage of him. The family also shared concerns about Vladek's mental health with News Nation in May of 2022, noting he'd spoken about archangels and demons the night before Steve left for Tennessee. According to the Charge's January 2022 article, Vladek's older sister Jody offered several theories. Vladek could be living in the woods. He could have joined a religious group, or he might have been harmed by someone he was trying to help. As for his part, Steve wondered if Vladek might have gone into the woods and gotten lost. Cheryl, speaking from her nursing background, had her own theory about what might have happened.
Yeah, just by the things the family has said, Bethany and Steve, especially, and Jody, it sounds like there was more unsettled something going on in his mind, and that those kind of things, from a nurse's point of view, and what I'd gone through a psych quarter in nursing, is that kind of abstract talking, that means your mind is ready to just snap. And then you read about people that's what's happened. They didn't think their family cared about them, and they had all these wrong thoughts in their mind, and they left and they become homeless. And so that's my thinking, is that that's what has happened, is that something told him, we're after you. And then he thought of his family's well-being, and he knew that he couldn't get us in trouble or whatever. And he left, he ran. And then I just only believe and hope that he's someplace where he's making himself the best he can be, and somewhere he's tripping up on words that are coming through the internet. If he looks up his name, that his family loves him so much. We miss him so much, and I love him so much.
Bethany believes that Vladek could have had a mental health episode, but she is not sure he found himself among the unhoused population, at least not at first. Things may have changed, though.
Like, when he went missing, I truly don't feel like he started off living with the homeless, because I don't think he could. Like, I know he made friendships in that way, but he just doesn't have the personality to be able to, I don't feel like, be able to handle that outdoor, lifestyle. Whether he is living with unhoused population now, years later, it's quite possible. But I feel like he either stayed with different people or something. I don't know.
While theories about what happened to Vladek remain just that, theories, the family refused to let his story fade. Bethany talked to us about the annual vigil that the family holds each November at the University of Central Florida.
It was really meaningful to me that UCF allowed us to have it there again this year. We had it there last year as well. And it's a location that's so close to where he went missing. Vladek and my dad's apartment was within a mile from there. And, the different fast food places that he frequented and Foxtail and all that are just down the road within a mile as well. And there's a chance that staff, professors, those that work at UCF, could have crossed paths with Vladek when he went missing. Vladek went to the same places quite often and starting up conversations with people. And those interactions, even the weeks leading up to when he went missing, are important. Different places where interactions happen, places that we might not know that Vladek would frequent, are important because it could lead us to different individuals and different friendships that we don't know about. And having at UCF, getting students involved, we had a few students that came out and interviewed us for a story on different platforms through UCF to just help spread his story further on campus. And several news stations from the local news came out as well, which is really important to share with those that might not be on social media as much. And even just those that were walking around the campus this year, we had several stop by and ask about Vladek's case and his story and learn about it, which was really powerful.
The third annual vigil, held in November of 2024, was attended by Nicole Schmidt, the mother of Gabby Petito. She has used her platform to advocate for all missing people, especially those whose cases don't generate headlines. According to People magazine, Nicole Schmidt spoke at the vigil about the concept of ambiguous loss. Quote, "It's a different kind of grief. You're in limbo. You don't have those answers." Cheryl understood exactly what Nicole meant.
When somebody's missing, it's a different kind of grief because there's no end. It hits you so hard in the beginning, like surely he's going to come, today, tomorrow, next, a week's gone by. We're going to see him a month, 2 months. We're going to see him. And then all of a sudden it's like you're part of this community and you realize there's a community of people that don't know where their loved ones are. And it's just, there's no closure.
In 2024, the Orange County Sheriff's Office told People magazine that the investigation remained open and encouraged anyone, quote, with even the smallest shred of information to reach out. The article also noted that since Vladek's disappearance, the department had utilized patrol deputies, emergency response teams, aviation units, drone operators, and bloodhounds in the search. And that's the most current update on the status of the investigation. Cheryl also spoke with People magazine, and she said, quote, "He is somewhere, we believe. All the searches have found nothing definitive, but we hold on to the hope that he's out there." That hope extends to the possibility that Vladek might see his own name online.
Would you say that you and the family are hopeful that social media is going to be part of solving this case?
I have to say yes, because every day I'm passing out cards. Yesterday I was out to eat, and I try to always be personable with who's ever serving me, and I get to know who they are and ask a little about their family. And then as it becomes a little quiet, I'll slip a card and I say, "This is my son, Vladek, and he's been gone for 4 years, and we have no idea what's happened, but we just believe that if it's shared on social media and prayers, that some breakthrough will happen, that somebody somewhere is going to know something and share it, and, we'll get answers."
The family continues their efforts in other ways as well. According to News Nation, they donate to Vladek's favorite charities in his name. Bethany, she's attended conferences across the country where she's connected with media, other families, and advocates. And life, it's gone on too. Bethany got married without her brother there, but victims advocates who've become friends, and maybe more like family, they were there to support her. Bethany told News Nation, quote, "It took a long time to get there. but I'm just trying to find the balance between still living my life. But I'm never going to stop fighting for him. Never. In our interview, Bethany explained that she's always thinking about Vladek and wishing there was more, practically speaking, that could be done for his case. It's not as easy as asking for this step or that step to be taken, because for a missing adult, the path is not clear-cut.
What kind of investigative support would you like to see to help you search?
It's a difficult situation to be in because, I feel like law enforcement in a lot of ways has their hand tied behind their back when an adult goes missing. They don't have the authority to dig into someone's life as much as we really need them to get answers. Because, no foul play is suspected so far. But also, we have nothing to go on. So how can we say no foul play if we don't have anything to go on either? So it's one of those places where I wish when a missing adult case happens that there's more that can be done early on, or at least earlier on, instead of being tied to, we can't subpoena for that. We can't, it's just really frustrating. Awareness is going to be the biggest way to help with Vlad's case, just because of how his personality is, where, he's known to start up conversations with strangers. Even the officer that came out and took the missing persons report, he started to describe Vladek to my dad before seeing a picture. And was like, isn't your son, a hefty guy, usually wears a black hoodie, those pants, there's like these gold legging pants, you can't miss them. And Dad's like, yeah, that describes him pretty well. And the officer said, I know Vladek. He came up to me and my partner just recently and thanked us for our service and started to have a conversation with us, asking us how our day is going. And like, that's the kind of personality Vladek has. Like, he'll find something about you and start up that conversation. And I believe there's people across this nation that might have crossed paths with him. And a couple areas that I really want to focus on this year, since Vladek is a creature of habit, is coffee shops and basketball courts. Because if he's in your town, chances are he's a regular at one of those two places. So over these next few months, over the wintertime, thanks to navigating advocacy, we are going to be shipping out packets of coffee sleeves with Vladek's picture, a little blurb of his story, and a QR code for people to learn more and follow his case. And there's already several people across the country that want to ask their coffee shop that they go to all the time to see if they'd be willing to use Vladek's coffee sleeves, because he truly could be anywhere in the country. And that's just one way to get his picture, his story to a place where the chances of getting a tip are much higher. And who knows, maybe Vladek gets a cup of coffee with his picture on it and calls home. That's my hope. Another area that we want to put a lot of focus on during the spring, when it warms up a little bit, is basketball courts and hanging his missing persons flyer on chain link fences around basketball courts, because he's probably playing basketball. He's probably got a, group of friends that he plays with that doesn't realize that he's considered a missing person. So again, there's people across the country that are willing to partner with me to place these flyers at basketball courts, and hopefully we'll get some tips. So if anyone else would like to join in these projects, feel free to reach out to me. It's just one simple way, one small way to help further his story.
At the time of his disappearance, Bryan Vladek Hasel was 22 years old. He would be 27 today. He's 5'8" and around 220 pounds, with dirty blonde hair and blue eyes. We've posted Vladek's photo to our social media. And if you see someone matching his description, his family asks that you do not make direct contact, and instead, reach out to the Orlando County Sheriff's Office at 404-254-7000. Vlad loves coffee shops, and he has an interest in the Appalachian Trail, and he could be living in the unhoused community. He has traveled across the United States and is familiar with various states, including Texas, Florida, New Hampshire, California, and Michigan. But he could be living anywhere. To follow the family's social media accounts and to stay up to date on their search efforts, please check the link in our show notes. Next time on The Fall Line, we begin our coverage of the murder of Christian Boyle, who was killed in Blount County, Alabama, and we introduce you to his twin brother, a veteran who's become the chief advocate in his case. If you know of a case that should be covered on The Fall Line, there's a link to our case submission form in the show notes. Thank you for listening. The Fall Line is an independent podcast, and we appreciate listener support. It allows us to do research, obtain FOIA, pay our content advisors, and support and donate to the causes we care about. Our therapy fund is paid for through Patreon and Apple Premium subscriptions. If you try out the products we advertise, please use our sponsor codes. It really helps. And please take a moment to rate and review our show in your podcast app of choice. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to check your subscription to make sure that you're set for automatic downloads so that you don't miss an episode. My book, Lay Them to Rest, is out everywhere. Find out more through the link in our show notes. The Fall Line is written, hosted, and researched by Laura Norton. Interviews by Brooke Hargrove. Engineered by Southern Gothic Media and Rachel Boyd. Content advisement by Vic Kennedy and Brandy C. Williams. Special thanks to Liz Lipka. We'd also like to thank Haley Gray for sharing her additional interview notes.